would lie about her daughter-in-law, and Patricia realizing her credibility was collapsing. The third domino was Daniel's father finding out and asking Patricia why she had gone through my belongings, and Patricia saying she was protecting their son, and Daniel's father saying you just insulted a woman whose company employs 400 people and whose family has more influence than we ever will, and what exactly were you protecting him from? The fourth domino was Thanksgiving, which happened 2 weeks later, and I showed up because Daniel asked me to, and I walked into Patricia's house, and every relative who had ever looked down on me suddenly wanted to talk to me, and Patricia's sister asked about my company, and Patricia tried to change the subject, and her sister said, "Patricia, why didn't you tell us Isabel was a Montgomery?" And Patricia said I didn't think it was relevant. And her sister said, "The Montgomery manufacturing family." And Patricia said, "I don't know," and her sister said, "You spent 3 years telling everyone she wasn't good enough, and the whole time she was funding half the nonprofits in this state," and Patricia left the room. The fifth domino was Christmas, when Patricia tried to give me an expensive gift as an apology, and I politely declined and said I didn't need anything, and she said, "Isabel, I'm trying to make amends," and I said, "You spent 3 years making me feel small because you thought I didn't have money, and now that you know I do, you want to be kind, and that's not an apology, that's a transaction." And she said, "I didn't know," and I said, "You didn't ask," and Daniel was standing there and he didn't defend her, and that was the moment she realized she had lost her son. The sixth domino was Patricia's social circle slowly icing her out, because people who care about status care about power, and Patricia had publicly disrespected someone with more of both, and her friends started declining her invitations, and her charity board asked her to step down, and she called me and said, "This is your fault," and I said I didn't tell anyone to do anything. "Patricia, I just stopped pretending your approval mattered." And she said, "You're destroying my life." And I said, "No, I'm just not holding it up anymore." And she hung up. 6 months later, Patricia's marriage started falling apart because Daniel's father blamed her for damaging their relationship with me and with Daniel, and they separated, and Patricia moved into a smaller house, and she called me and said, "Are you happy now?" And I said, "I'm not happy or unhappy, Patricia. I'm just living my life." And she said, "You did this," and I said I didn't do anything. I answered a phone call and got in a car, and everything that happened after that was a consequence of how you treated people, and she said I didn't know who you were. And I said, "Exactly, you didn't know and you didn't care. And you treated me poorly because you thought you could, and now you're learning that people who judge others based on assumptions pay a price when those assumptions are wrong," and she didn't call again. I didn't destroy Patricia. I didn't ruin her marriage or her social standing or her relationship with her son. I just stopped participating in the story she had written about me. And when I stepped out of that story, the whole structure collapsed because it was built on a lie. And the lie was that I needed her approval, and I never did. And the moment she threw my belongings in the rain, she gave me permission to stop pretending, and the car showing up wasn't revenge. It was just truth, and truth has a way of unraveling things that were never stable to begin with. If you've ever been judged by people who didn't know you, if you've been dismissed because of assumptions about where you came from or what you had, if you've spent years being made to feel less than by people who never bothered to ask who you actually were, I need you to know this. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. And the moment you stop trying to earn respect from people who've already decided you don't deserve it, is the moment their power over you ends. And sometimes the best revenge is just letting people see who you always were and watching them realize they were wrong the whole time, and that realization, that moment when they understand they misjudged you, is something you don't have to create. You just have to stop hiding and let it happen.